My son told the neighbors he was finally in charge of our family home. He changed the locks and hosted a backyard party. I didn't knock. I rang someone else. The sheriff arrived with a folder. I'll start at the exact moment that made people stop and stare. If you're watching or reading this somewhere right now, on your phone at lunch, on your couch after work, tell me where you are. Drop a comment about the city or corner of the world you're in, because what happened to me could happen anywhere. A quiet street, a neat yard, a sunny afternoon where the grass shines and the world looks safe. I stepped out of a taxi with a grocery bag and a folded newspaper, and I heard my son bragging to the neighbors that he was finally in charge. I could see them on the other side of the gate. I could see the grill smoking, a string of gold balloons bobbing over the fence, paper plates clattering on a long table, and people I barely knew stepping across the lawn my wife once tended like a prayer. I reached for my key and felt nothing but air. My pocket was empty. My hand knew before my head did. He had changed the locks. He had changed the locks on my home, and he was smiling like a politician with a microphone and a promise he didn't plan to keep. I did not shake the gate. I did not shout my son's name. I stood still with my bag, listening to the fizz of meat on the grill and the murmur of voices that weren't mine. The music thumped through the ground like an unwelcome heartbeat. My son's voice rose above it, cheerful and cold. "We're making changes around here," he said. "Dad's downsizing. I'm taking over maintenance, parties, all of it." He didn't see me yet. I watched him lift a bottle and pour a drink as if he'd always owned that motion, as if the bottle had been born in his hand. I looked at him and saw the boy who used to run across this lawn chasing a kite, and I also saw a stranger who had measured this house like a prize he was due. I felt something I can only describe as a thin, clean line of ice going down my spine. Not heat, not fire, ice. It made everything very clear. I knew how to knock. I knew how to ask and argue and plead. But I had knocked too many times in too many ways over the last year. I had knocked when he refused to eat dinner with me at the table we built from our old barn door. I had knocked when he rolled his eyes at memories of his mother, my wife, as if love were an embarrassment he didn't have time for. I had knocked when he left a birthday card for me that said only best, with his name scrawled like a receipt signature. I had knocked when he whispered with his wife at the edge of the room and stared at the floor while I talked. And each time, I felt a little more like a ghost in my own house, drifting past the living. Today I chose not to knock. I set my grocery bag on the front step, unfolded my phone, and rang someone else. The dispatcher's voice was level and bored, and I gave my name and my address and the sentence that felt strange even as I said it. "I believe my son is trespassing and hosting a party at my home after changing the locks." The dispatcher asked a few questions, asked for patience, and told me a sheriff's deputy would arrive. I hung up and tucked the phone back in my pocket. The neighbors at the far end of the fence were watching. Mrs. Chen, who once brought soup when my wife was sick, turned away as if I had caught her looking through a window. The wind pushed a paper banner up so I could read it. New era. I let out a breath, and the air tasted like charcoal and orange soda. I stood there waiting, and in the waiting came a memory like a hand on my shoulder. It pulled me back to the first day we had closed on this house. I could smell the paint, feel the dust under my fingers as we moved boxes. My wife, Lila, had sat on the porch steps with a plastic cup of lemonade and laughed at how the front door stuck. "We'll sand it," she said. "We'll sand it together." She planted the climbing roses by the side gate and taught our son to water them while humming the broken parts of old songs. We used to count how long it took for the kettle to whistle while the boy tried to whistle louder. We hung a wind chime with copper tubes from a hook under the eaves. Every part of this place was a layer of our lives. We built it with evenings and weekends and arguments about paint color and apologies after. We built it by swinging hammers and falling asleep in armchairs with our shoes still on. When Lila got sick, this house learned the sound of quiet crying, of pills tipped into a hand, of late-night laughs when a painkiller rolled us both into silliness. This house had kept her voice in its wood. Sometimes I could still hear it in the floorboards, a low, loving echo. That is what he wanted to sweep away with a new lock and a party playlist. The sheriff's car parked by the curb without siren or flash, just a shape and a presence. A woman stepped out, looked around, and walked toward me with her hat tucked under her arm and a folder in her hand. Her shoes made that steady sound that says law more than any badge. "Sir," she said, with the kind of politeness that feels like a good wall, tall and reliable. I introduced myself and told her what I had told the dispatcher. I kept my voice calm and even, and I looked at the house while I spoke, not at the party. I saw the curtain in the living room move and a face slide away. The deputy listened, checked my ID, and then lifted the folder a little. "We can take a look at documents," she said. "We can also have a conversation with whoever is inside." I nodded and opened my palm toward the backyard gate, as if I were showing her a room for rent. I felt nothing but that cold line of ice, and it steadied my hand. We walked down the side path, past the roses I'd trimmed last spring. Thorns brushed my sleeve. The gate gave its old complaint, a long wooden moan. The music got louder, voices too. My son turned and saw me, and his grin snapped off like a light. For a second, I saw him at age 6, contrite after stealing cookies. But the second was gone. "What are you doing here?" he said, not loud enough for everyone, just enough for me and the deputy. "What I've always done," I said. Standing in my yard, I let the words sit. Then I turned my head toward the deputy without taking my eyes off my son. She stepped forward and introduced herself to the group, voice steady and official. She explained why she was here and asked for the person in charge. A few people moved aside like waves moving off a rock, and my son tried on a brave smile that didn't fit his face. "That's me," he said. "I'm in charge. Are you?" The deputy said, not like a challenge, just like the beginning of a form. "Yes," he said. "Dad's transitioning out. He's old. He's moving. I'm taking over." His wife stood at his shoulder, chin raised. Her parents leaned against the fence with plastic cups and a well-fed silence. The deputy nodded, like someone listening to a child's story about a dragon. Then she opened the folder. Papers clipped together made the kind of sound that makes some men honest. "We're going to verify property ownership and current occupancy," she said. "Sir," she looked at me, "do you have your deed, identification, and any relevant documents?" I did. I had kept them ready in a fireproof box since the night I watched my son stare too long at the safe and ask me, "So what happens to all of this?" I had known that question had teeth. I had known the day might come when it would bite. I handed the deputy the copies I'd put in my bag that morning. Insurance habit. Trust but verify. She skimmed, slid a page forward, and asked my son for his identification too. He tried to laugh. "Are you serious?" he asked. She didn't laugh back. He went inside and came out with his wallet, the grin gone, the corners of his mouth white. Neighbors had slowed their chewing. A few phones glowed at chest level, that guilty brightness people try to hide in their palms. The grill smoke hung over the table like a low cloud. The deputy matched names and addresses and numbers without a hurry. She looked at my son. "These documents show your father is the sole owner of this property," she said, as if reading the weather. "There's no record of a transfer, no lease, no authorization for you to change locks or host events. At this time, this appears to be trespass." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. My son's face went red in a fast, ugly way, the kind of red that means someone's shouting inside their skull. "This is ridiculous," he said. "We're family." He's old. He told me he was moving to the condo by the lake. He's been saying that for months. He looked at me like a man expecting a lifeline. I kept my voice level. "I said I was considering a condo when I can no longer handle the stairs," I answered. "I said that day is not today. And I never said this house would stop being my home." I let that settle. My son's wife looked from me to the deputy to the neighbors, doing math she didn't like. "We had to change the locks," my son tried again, more desperate now. "Dad keeps misplacing things. It's a safety issue. We're trying to help." The deputy did not sigh, though she might have wanted to. "You're free to help," she said, "but you can't help by taking property that isn't yours. And if your father misplaces things, that is all the more reason to keep things legally clear." She turned another page in the folder and tapped a line. "Additionally, there is an affidavit on file regarding a will and deed of trust." She looked at me and I nodded. I had placed it there after Lila passed. We had spoken with a lawyer and drafted exactly what we needed because love isn't just flowers and long talks. Sometimes love is law. Sometimes love is signatures. My son barked out a laugh that had no humor in it. A will? He said. Mom's will. She left this to me. She told me. She said one day, this would be mine. I felt the kitchen of 15 years ago rush back, the smell of soup. My wife's hands warm around a mug, our son sulking because we wouldn't let him take the car out at midnight. That night she had looked at him and said a sentence that felt small and large all at once. You will have what you earn and what you protect with kindness. She had said other things too. Written things, signed things. She had been precise. We had been careful. The deputy invited us, me, my son, his wife, to speak at the side of the yard away from the music. We stood near the roses. Their red seemed too bright. I could hear the wind chime stutter under the eaves, a broken tune I knew by heart. The deputy summarized the situation. I was the owner. Locks had been changed without consent. A party was in progress. If I wished, I could ask everyone to leave immediately. If there was resistance, she could cite and remove. I nodded. I looked at my son, who looked at the ground, then at me, then away. His wife folded her arms so tight it looked like she had tied a knot out of herself. Before we clear the yard, I said, I want to show you one more thing. I don't know why I said it like that. Maybe because stories need doors that open one after another, and I wanted this door to swing wide. We walked back through the gate to the front steps. I knelt, slowly, because my knees have opinions, and lifted the flower pot that has stood to the right of the door since the first spring we lived here. I set it on the mat. Beneath it was the old lockbox Lila and I had used when the boy first started staying out late. I opened it and took out a small envelope, yellowed and soft. The deputy watched. My son did too, his breath fast. I opened the envelope and took out a folded letter and a copy of the deed addendum. I handed the deputy the addendum. The letter I kept. My wife, I said, and my voice wanted to break and I didn't let it, was a school teacher. She believed in homework. She believed in writing things down. When she got sick, we talked about everything that mattered. We wrote it down. We filed it. We kept copies. I gave the deputy the second copy and watched her read. She nodded once, slow. She did not smile or frown. She did her job. What is this? My son said, though he could read. The deputy answered first. This addendum, she said, reaffirms sole ownership in your father and stipulates conditional disinheritance in the event of coercion, neglect, or attempts to remove him from the premises. It's signed, witnessed, and recorded. It also includes language related to power of attorney and medical decisions, which are irrelevant today, but consistent with the overall structure. She turned to me. Do you want to press trespass charges? I looked at my son. For a moment, I saw him as a baby with his hand wrapped around my finger, and also as the man who had wrapped his hand around my doorknob and locked me out. I thought of Lila and the night she told me, don't let grief make you mean. Let it make you plain. Plain, simple, clear. I nodded, but not for charges. I want them to leave, I said. I want my locks restored. I want my peace. The deputy turned toward the yard, and though she did not raise her voice, the air changed. Authority has a wavelength you feel in your ribs. She announced that the event was over. She said the word trespass in a way that made paper plates look like contraband. People began to move, first one by the cooler, then two by the grill. Some put cups in the bin, suddenly polite. Some avoided my eyes. A man I had never seen whispered, "Sorry, sir," as he passed me on the path. My son didn't move. His wife didn't either. They stood like figures in a painting of pride. The deputy waited. Now, she said. The word broke something. My son started to gather things, furious and graceless, and then stopped. He turned to me. You backstabbed me, he said. The words were ugly, but his face looked more lost than angry. You backstabbed me with papers. I should have said more. I should have explained how you cannot backstab someone by standing exactly where you've always stood. But I kept it plain. I told you the rules, I said. You didn't listen. This is what happens when you pretend love is a shortcut to property. He flinched. I think that hurt more than a scream would have. He tried another attack. Mom wanted me to have the house, he said. She wanted me to have a family here. She told me. I held up the letter in my hand. I'm sure she told you many things, I said. This is what she told me on paper. I unfolded the letter. I did not read it out loud because some words, even when useful, belong to fewer ears. I looked at the familiar lines, at the shape of her handwriting that always dipped in the same place. The letter said many things, but it ended with a sentence I could say. A home is not a prize. It is a promise. By the time I put the letter back, the yard was almost empty. The deputy asked for the new keys. My son said he didn't have them, then found them, then handed them over with a stare like a held breath. He put a set on the table as if throwing a card in a game he was losing. We walked to the front door together, me, my son, the deputy. I turned the key and the lock turned the way it always had, with that same stubborn little hitch near the end. The door opened and the house breathed out. I stepped inside. It smelled like lemon oil and something else, my wife's perfume, or a memory pretending to be scent. I stood in the hallway and let the cool of it settle on my skin. The deputy wrote a few notes, handed me a card with a number to call if there were further problems, and told my son that any attempt to return without permission would be a violation. My son nodded without nodding. His wife didn't look at anyone. The deputy left with a professional "good afternoon." Her car started and moved away quiet as a thought. My son and I stood in the foyer. It is a small space with a mirror that has watched our faces change over the years. I could see us both in that glass, an old man and a not-so-young man who had expected to be younger longer. He cracked first. "I did this for us," he said. "For our future. For efficiency. You need someone in charge." I was trying to help. I spoke soft because soft cuts when the truth is behind it. "You tried to help by pushing me out," I said. "You tried to help by making yourself a king and me a subject. That isn't help. That's a coup." He said nothing. "You could have asked," I said. "You could have made a plan with me. You could have become a partner in this, not a pirate." His lips pressed so thin they might have vanished. "You never think I'm ready," he said. "You never trust me." I thought of all the times I had trusted him with cars, with credit cards, with house keys, with the truth about his mother's illness, with my grief. I thought of how trust is a bridge you build from both sides. "I trust you to be better than today," I said. "I trust you to learn from this. But I do not trust you with my home when you act like this." He looked like a boy again then, a boy who had fallen off a bike and wanted someone to blame. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. And there it was, the question that opens or ends a life. I kept it practical. "Apologize to the neighbors for the disturbance," I said. "Call the locksmith. Pay for replacement locks and for the scratches you made. Clean the backyard. Return any item that is not yours. And then take a week away from this house. Think. After that, come back and we will talk like men who love the same woman and want to honor her." I watched the words land. I could tell which ones hurt. He nodded in a stiff way, like his neck was borrowed. "Fine," he said. "A week." He started for the door, then stopped. "Do you hate me?" he asked, not looking up. The question made the room brighter and dimmer at the same time. "I love you," I said. "That is why I did not call a tow truck for your soul. That is why I called the law instead of using my fists. I love you. That will not change. What might change is whether you get to share the good things that love built." He went out with his head low, like a man leaving a chapel where he didn't understand the sermon. The door shut behind him with the same old sound it had always made. It comforted me. The week that followed was quiet in the way that means healing and not absence. I made coffee every morning at the small table by the window and watched the light move across the sink. I opened the windows and let the air move through the rooms. I talked to Lila, or rather to her memory, and told her what had happened and what I had done. I told her about the deputy's shoes and how the word trespass can sound like a prayer when it protects the right person. I told her about the roses and the way they had brushed my sleeve as if checking on me. I oiled the hinges of the side gate and put the wind chime back on its hook where a storm had shaken it loose. I called the locksmith and watched a man with calm hands return the door to its old key. I kept the new keys and put a copy of them in the safe with the papers and the letter and the adage my wife had lived by. Write it down. Make it clear. Then you can rest. On the 7th day, my son came back. He didn't knock for a long time, which I took as progress. When he finally did, it was a polite sound, not a demand. I opened the door and he kept his hands visible as if approaching a shy animal. He had shaved. His eyes looked smaller. He said hello. I stepped aside and let him in. He looked around the living room like it might charge him for staring. I talked to a counselor, he said. I talked to my wife. We talked to her parents. We all said stupid things. I listened to myself say them. I didn't like what I heard. He took a breath. I'm sorry. He said it in a good way, the way that leaves no space for a but. I sat down and he sat too, and we let the couch do the old job of holding us up. He asked me to tell him again about the will. I told him. He asked me to tell him how I had felt that day when he changed the locks. I told him that too. He did not look away. He did not defend himself. He nodded when he should have. He did the work of being a man who is learning. That is slow work, but I am slow now. Slow suits me. We went through practical things, finances, chores, schedules. I asked him whether he wanted to be a partner or a prince. He smiled in a sad, real way and said, partner. We wrote down what that meant. We talked about grief and how it can turn into greed that pretends to be love. We talked about the way anger masks fear and the way fear makes people grab keys that aren't theirs. We talked about Lila and what she would have done. We ended by walking to the garden and taking turns with the hose, watering the roses while the sun went down. He said, I miss Mom. I said, me too. The words were small and heavy at the same time. He asked if he could have a cutting from the rose bush to try planting one at his place. I cut a piece with the little pruning scissors and handed it to him like you hand someone a candle in a dark room. The neighbors took a little time. People remember the wrong things first. But time and repeated behavior do what one speech cannot. My son knocked on doors with a plate of cookies and an apology short enough to be true. Mrs. Chen smiled with her eyes before she smiled with her mouth. She brought dumplings over a few days later and asked if the roses needed fertilizer. The world slid back into its grooves. The wind chime sang its odd song. The gate squeaked, and then, after I oiled it again, it didn't. The house kept what it had always kept. Our lives. Our repairs, our mistakes, our gratitude. Some nights, when the air is sharp and clean, I sit on the porch with a blanket and a mug. I think about how easy it is to confuse strength with shouting and ownership with possession. Strength, I've learned, lives in quiet choices. The choice to call the law instead of letting rage write the story. The choice to hold your ground without striking. The choice to require better behavior from the people you love because you love them. Ownership lives in responsibility and patience and paperwork, yes, but also in watering roses on days when your back hurts and in sanding a door that sticks because you promised you would. A home is not a prize. It is a promise. That one line has become my spine. When I say it out loud, I hear Lila's voice as if the wood is speaking back. I tell you this not because I enjoy the memory, but because someone out there needs to hear it. Maybe your struggle is not about a house. Maybe it's a business or a car or a cupboard of old letters. Maybe it's not about property at all. Maybe it's about respect. The method is the same. Keep your papers in order. Keep your voice calm. Keep your dignity like a well-folded shirt. Do not let anger turn you into the person your enemy wants you to be. Be plain, be clear. And if the people you love forget the promise of the place you share, do the work of reminding them with actions that leave no bruises and yet leave a mark they never forget. The law is not love, but it can keep love safe long enough for love to do its work. Once, a long time ago, when our son was 10, he stood beside me at the kitchen counter while I wrote a check for the mortgage. He asked what a mortgage was, and I tried to explain in words a child could hold. It's a promise you make until you can pay for the promise you made, I said. He nodded like he understood, which he probably didn't then, not really. But I think he understands now. When he left that day after watering the roses, he looked at the house and didn't look at me for a second, like the house was a person he owed an apology to. He said, "See you Sunday." We have dinner on Sundays now. Just the two of us sometimes with his wife. Sometimes with a quiet seat at the table that is still Lila's, whether anyone is sitting in it or not. We don't say a grace out loud, but we hold one in our mouths and let it warm the food. If you're still with me, thank you. Tell me where you are reading from. Tell me if your house has a sound it makes that you love. The squeak of a stair, the click of a latch, the wind through a vent. Tell me if you've had to stand still and be strong in a place you built with someone who isn't here anymore. I hope the lesson I learned the hard way can keep one more door from getting the wrong key. And if you ever find yourself on your own front step with your hand in your pocket and your key gone, remember this: you don't have to knock if the knocking has never been heard. You can ring someone else, not to start a war but to keep a promise. When the right folder opens, the right truth walks out. If this story moved you, if it made you think of your own family or your own home, please like, share, comment where you're watching from, and subscribe for more stories. Your support helps these lessons reach someone who needs them today.